Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to do our final lesson on contentment. And this is I guess it actually goes back into last year, where we went through the Burroughs book, and then we've transitioned into this video by Jeff Mannion, trying to make it a little more accessible, practical application, just building on the solid base of the Burroughs book. So I want to do just a quick brief review, and then the video I've got tonight is only 10 minutes. So we'll have plenty of time for more discussion. I guess one thing I'm curious is, even just in the past week, maybe just something to think about if you want to participate in the discussion. Has anything happened in the past week, either good or bad, in relation to contentment in your life? Has just your daily activities, has anything come up? Just think about that if you're willing to share that. I would certainly do that. But let me open up and just pray real quick. Father, just do thank you for bringing us here tonight. Pray that this lesson would be profitable to us, not just as we study it, but as we go forward and try to live our life according to your will. And do pray that if there is anything that we need to learn, even if it might be painful, that you would teach us that, however that applies to each one of us individually or within our families. So pray that you'll bless our time, and pray that you will be present with us tonight as we seek to learn more about you and how to live a contented life. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, so I do want to open up, just want to share a couple scripture verses. These are verses that we studied as part of the Burroughs book, and they're also the two primary verses that Jeff Mannion references in his video. So I'll just read those again just to kind of lay the framework. The first one is 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. And this is where Paul is discussing contentment, teaching Timothy. He says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." So that's the first one. And then the second one that Mannion mentions is also Paul, and this is in Philippians. It's chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. And this is where Paul says, "I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." And then he adds this statement, "I can do all this through him who gives me strength." And remember, in the context of Philippians, Paul's actually writing this from prison. So he's in a kind of a bad spot that most of us would consider that a bad spot, and he's telling how content he is, whether he's in plenty or want. So just curious, has anybody memorized the Burroughs definition of contentment? Anyone? I haven't myself. But I do have it here, so.
Sweet inward frame with spirit, something else.
Yeah, that's all part of it. So this is how Burroughs described it. Again, just to go back a few weeks. He says, "Christian contentment is that sweet, inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit which freely submits to and delights in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition." So just a beautiful description of contentment. And then what we tried to do is, try to shorten that. If you can't remember that, if you can't memorize it, we said, well, what is something manageable that you might be able to remember? So does anybody have a shorter version of contentment? Adeline?
Satisfied heart in any condition.
A satisfied heart in any condition. Okay. So that's something committed to memory. Anybody just in their own study or in their own minds have anything different? Okay, that's a good summary. Again, we talked about the two components. One is the inward element, that Burroughs brings out. So speaking to the heart or spiritual, that aspect of it. So that's one aspect, the inward, and the other aspect is just that idea of any condition, whether you're in plenty or want, whether you're well-fed or hungry, being able to be content whether you have something you desire or whether you don't have it. But just that thought of a satisfied heart under any circumstance. Okay, and then last week, do you remember what the video was about, the main topic in the video? You guys remember from last week, anybody? Asher?
Basically, like, you're living in, like, a hut, basically, and you go to, like, a friend's house, and their house is, like, beautiful, and when you're going back to your house, it's silent. And it's like, you're not content just because of that.
So that was an example. What was the word that Mannion used to describe what he believed one of the chief enemies of contentment?
Comparison.
Comparison, which is that's just what Asher described, that situation about family moving into their first house and they're just overjoyed, and then they go and have dinner at somebody who has a nicer house and all of a sudden they're miserable. So yeah, that's what the main focus of the video was comparison. And just how does that relate to your lives, where you say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm content, and then all of a sudden you see something and you're like, whoa, no, I'm not. You know, how can your contentment just leave in an instant? So that was kind of the focus of last week. And then where he'd stopped last week is where we're going to pick up. I love the summary statement. He says, comparison is a thief, it steals your joy, and a murderer, it kills your contentment. That's kind of where he left things. So what we're going to do is, I'll just give a brief introduction to the video this week. It's about 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for some open discussion. So I don't know if you remember the very last thing, the fourth question that Mannion is going to answer after he talked about the enemy of contentment, which was comparison. He's now asking the question, why is contentment more difficult today than, say, even 25 years ago? That's going to be the focus of this last bit of video. And you guys, imagine you could probably think of things, but why is contentment so much harder today than even 25 years ago? Now, if you're not 25 years old, maybe you don't know the answer, but if you're over 25, maybe just think back how technology has changed. So key in on that. That's just a preview. I don't want to take away any of the thunder. Mannion is much more gifted at explaining it. But why is contentment more difficult today than even 25 years ago? And then after he talks about that, he's going to kind of bring everything to closure by talking about what is one of the single greatest effects of living a contented life. So as we're on this road of trying to have this inward, satisfied heart, whether we have our desires or we don't, if we can walk down that road of contentment and get to that place where we say, I'm satisfied, whatever my condition, what is one of the greatest effects that could have in your life? And he's actually going to break that down into different subjects, but it's all going to be umbrellaed over, you know, if we can come to a place where we're more content, or content as Burroughs describes it, what effect will that have in your life? So he'll talk about that. And I don't know if you guys, do you guys remember the exercise we did 2 weeks ago about counting the number of pairs of shoes? Okay. Again, it wasn't about shoes. Shoes is a metaphor, fill in the blank for whatever it is that you're pursuing. I made a comment. I said we're actually going to come back to that in the closing lesson. So just be on the lookout in Mannion's closing. He makes this statement. This is just my own personal opinion. It's one of the most profound statements I've ever heard. I mean, when he said it, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. So I don't know if you'll even recognize the statement that I'm talking about, but it's in relation, if you remember the shoe analogy, just kind of keep that in your mind. He doesn't actually mention shoes, but if you remember the exercise we went through, he'll make a reference to a statement. Again, just by personal opinion, I thought it was very profound. So keep your ears open for that. And then he is going to give a reference to Mr. Rogers. You guys know Mr. Rogers. Don't know if Mr. Rogers was a Christian. He was a PCUSA minister. But there was a good quote in there that he references in his closing from Mr. Rogers. So I'd say just keep your ears open for that as well. Again, it's about 10 minutes. But before we play it, I'm just wondering, does anybody have any comments or just questions from the previous lessons? We can take time to answer questions right now, if anybody has anything.
I gained one pair of shoes.
What about your shoes, Floyd?
I gained one pair.
Oh, you gained a pair. Okay, that's all right. Okay, well, remember, look out for this profound quote. It may make you think about gaining that additional pair of shoes. Okay, well, I will go ahead and start the video. And we're going to pick it up where he left off last time about comparison, his summary, and then it'll go into why contentment is more difficult, and then this one of the single greatest effects of having a contented life. So, Jason, can you do the lights? And hopefully I've got the sound figured out. We'll find out right away.
You possess. Comparison is a thief and a murderer. It will steal your joy. It will massacre contentment. Just understand, if you go, yes, here and now, here and now, here and now, I want to be able to say with the Apostle Paul, I have learned to be content. Just understand that it will only be a matter of minutes before comparison rears its ugly head. And question, why is this far more difficult today, my friends, than it was 25 years ago? Why is this more difficult today than it was 25 years ago? Because 25 years ago, often when you played the comparison game, you were comparing your reality with somebody else's reality. Today, when we play the comparison game, often we're not comparing our reality with somebody else's reality. Through social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, you're not comparing your life with their life. You're comparing your life with their image projection. You're comparing your day-to-day world with their highlight reel. What people frequently post on a social media platform like Facebook are their most interesting moments in life, their most attractive friends, themselves at their thinnest, and themselves at their most exotic locations. I mean, at Facebook, someone almost never goes, "This is me in my cubicle." "This is me in a meeting." An hour later, same meeting. "This is me cleaning up after the dog." "I can't believe how much I ate over Memorial Day weekend. Do I look bloated to you?" And so you end up comparing your day-to-day grind with somebody else's highlight reel. Someone will go on a decent vacation. It will include a truly incredible meal at a truly fantastic restaurant. It will also include a 4-hour flight delay at Midway, a day and a half of rain, and an argument that takes place that isn't quite over yet the next morning. I've never experienced one of these personally, but I've heard that they happen. And they will get back from vacation and post the picture of the wonderful meal at the wonderful restaurant. It happened, but that's not all that happened. I had a friend of mine say, if I want to get depressed in 10 minutes, all I have to do is go online and see where everybody else is going and what everybody else is doing. This issue of comparison is harder than it's ever been before, because often we're not even comparing our reality with somebody else's reality. I just got to ask him, man, what's in your bowl? Do you have legs that move? Do you have eyes that see? Are you literate? Can you make change for $1? Did you eat yesterday? Is it likely that you will eat tomorrow? Do you have to choose from a wardrobe of clothing? You have to choose from get to choose from a variety of restaurants or a variety of things in the refrigerator. What is in your bowl? The spirit of contentment says, I am so full. I am so full. God, it's so good. Comparison will kill this off. So last question. First question is, who were these people? The residents of Ephesus. Same challenges we have. Second question, what is contentment? Cultivation of a satisfied heart. Third question, what is the greatest enemy of contentment? I believe in the top 2 or 3, definitely comparison, the comparison game. Fourth question, if you pursue contentment with all your heart, what is the single greatest effect that you will find in your life? I think it's freedom. I think, first of all, it's financial freedom. All things considered, those who are able to say, here and now, I'm content. With food and clothing, I am content, are less likely to buy things they don't need with money that they don't have. And so contentment can be kind of the foundation for a life that pursues financial freedom. I think all things being equal, those who learn contentment can experience a level of financial freedom that those who are wildly discontent, that go, I am not enough, I do not have enough, and something on the outside will fill me, it just can lead to crazy debt. We're talking freedom here. Financial freedom. Secondly, freedom from clutter. We can live more clutter-free when we don't buy. By the way, listen, you can never get enough of what you don't need. If you don't need 60 pair of shoes, 80 isn't enough. If you don't need 30 coats, 40 will not be enough. You can never get enough of what you do not need. Second level of freedom, we're talking freedom here. I think it's freedom from clutter. I think it's living with a more streamlined life. Third area of freedom, I think it's freedom to give. My dear friends, those of us who God is calling to generosity, if at the core of our being we go, I am not enough and I do not have enough, generosity will get strangled. And those of us that have learned the way of contentment or are in the road of learning it, I have so much because of what Jesus did for me, how he fills me. I have enough. I am enough. It unleashes generosity. I think it's freedom to give. And lastly, I think it's freedom to enjoy. I think it's freedom to enjoy the people in our lives and the blessings we have without clinging to the illusion that if we just get it, I will be whole and all will be well. What we're talking about here is freedom. Freedom to enjoy the blessings we receive by the hundreds. So let's talk about one of my heroes, Fred Rogers. Yes, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Fred Rogers' television program ran from like 1968 to 2001. Near the end of his life, died of cancer a few years ago. Near the end of his life, Fred Rogers said this. He said, the older I get, the more I've come to believe that nothing I buy can take away my loneliness, fill my emptiness, or heal my brokenness. Can I say that again? The older I get, the more I've come to believe that nothing I buy can take away my loneliness, fill my emptiness, or heal my brokenness. Let's read this text one more time together from 1 Timothy chapter 6. Ready? But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. My friends, that was written by a man who is free. Written by a man who is free. So just now as we close, I guess the best question is just, how did God meet you tonight? Where did you hear his whisper? Where did you feel his nudge? Perhaps what surfaced in your heart was just deep gratitude. You look back 20 years ago at the way you lived, and there was just this hunger that you were trying to fill materially, and you feel like God has moved you or is moving you away from that. And maybe what surfaced in your heart was just deep gratitude for God's movement. Maybe it's that one verse where Paul said, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And something that surfaced was, dear Jesus, I need you. Because my situation is awful and ugly. I just need you so badly to give me the strength to do what I can never pull off on my own. Where did God meet you tonight? Any habits that would be curtailed? Any movement you detect? Just take a moment, open your hands, speak to the Father. Ask what He would speak to you in this moment. And express your willingness to move if He calls you to move.
Okay. Anybody catch that profound quote that he gave? Ben, what do you think it was? Yeah. Yeah, that just hit me. I was like, every time I'm buying that pair of shoes, it's like, okay, if I just get that one more, then it'll be all right. It's like, you can never get enough of what you don't need. I think you can apply that to cars or houses or money or anything. So, I'm not saying it's one of the most profound quotes, but for me, it was pretty profound. I thought it was pretty cool, so that's kind of stuck with me. Anybody have any thoughts on just what he talked about in terms of social media, or he talked about freedom, the financial freedom, freedom to give, freedom from clutter. Any thoughts on that? Anybody? Amy?
Something else I thought with social media is you're also comparing yourself with a much broader base of people too, not just your neighbors or your coworkers. You know, you're comparing yourself with sometimes hundreds of people that you might not actually ever really see in your or haven't seen in a long time. Various walks of life.
And I think even today, do you even know if you're comparing yourself to someone that's real?
And follow celebrities,
yeah.
You know, and compare yourself to them.
Yeah, so you can create something totally fake and it seems real. So, absolutely, yeah.
Is this part of the 25 years ago?
Yeah, so the point was 25 years ago you didn't have social media. But now you do. Ben and then Philip.
So I think this, I don't want to get into politics too much, but I think this does greatly affect our politics too. Like the socialist movement, where it's a political movement based off of envy. It's everything's built around comparison. They see Jeff Bezos and they lose their everyone lives because he has too much stuff. That stuff should belong to all of us. Kind of thing. You didn't really have that 25 years ago, at least in the country.
Yeah, and I certainly haven't heard anyone saying that whatever they believe, it's to glorify God. So, yeah, absolutely. Philip?
Yeah, I think what Ben just said is spot on. You know, there's a whole movement built around envy and built around comparison. Yeah, absolutely. I think, let's see. I think just at a fundamental level, social media has reduced the way that we reward ourselves, or the way that we have the experience of approval down to a like button. So we've been trained, and we've allowed ourselves to be trained that if someone else has more likes than me, then they're more valid than me. And so that leads inevitably to a reductionism in argument, in reason, in anything deep, and it moves towards shallowness. How do you get more likes? How do you get more approval? Well, you do it by appealing to as many people as possible, and you can't do that, by going deep. So we've really shot ourselves in the foot, and we've allowed ourselves to be trained like lab rats, to experience, to get our fix, as it were, by how many likes we get. And you can't go halfway. You have to either completely renounce that so that it really doesn't control you, as far as how much approval you're getting, or you have to go all in and basically be a slave to the whole system. So I think that has created an entire debilitating effect on our culture.
Absolutely.
And like Amy pointed out, now you're dealing with everybody in the world as opposed to your neighbors. Your neighbors used to have a real relationship with your neighbors, and now most people don't know their neighbors and don't have a relationship with them, but they're here on the keyboard, on their phone. So, dehumanization.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Gigi?
I'm not on Facebook a lot, but I see a lot of vanity in people.
Yeah, it's, there's benefits to it, but I'm not sure if the benefits outweigh the evils of it. Ben?
So I want to comment on two things. So number one, the dehumanization thing and the vanity thing. Me and my mom talked about vanity a lot, not recently, but a few weeks ago. Yeah, remember the kitchen? Okay, so it's not.
Oh. Okay.
So, so if in a world where people generally think that God is dead, there's nothing to live for objectively, so they have to be vain in order to, wake up every day. Nothing is driving them but the material conditions they know. Again, that was boosted by the social media comparison thing. And tying that into the dehumanization aspect of things, I like to say if anyone starts sounding like one famous angry German guy I knew a few decades ago, I don't like to associate with them. But that's starting to become everybody. If something's inconvenient in someone else's personhood for them, they like to take from it, like abortion, for example. They have to strip away the personhood of the baby, which they admit by this point it's life. Most people like it. They admit that it's life, but then they start questioning, is it a person? Does it have value? So they dehumanize things in order to take in more things, whether it be comfort, economic stability, which I don't think they can actually achieve economic stability by killing a person, but something like that. So they need the vanity to drive them, including dehumanizing.
Yeah, and so regardless of social media, that is a change. But again, we can go all the way back to Ephesus, where there was discontentment. They had just a wide variety of things put in front of them to pursue other than God. And so that hasn't changed. So it is, perhaps the social media aspect has changed things, but the issue of contentment and just saying, I'm content even if everything's taken away from me. My family, my health, I'm content with God. I've got Christ and that's all I need. If we can all get there, and sometimes we feel like maybe we're getting there and then all of a sudden something happens and it takes it away from us. But hopefully as we go through this process of life and sanctification, we can grow in contentment, and hopefully we can help each other, even within this room, grow in contentment. So I really enjoyed the video. I thought it was just a good kind of way to take the Burroughs information and practically apply it. Philip.
Ross was first. I think Ross was raising his hand.
Like in the last 90 days, I've been kicked off of every single social media platform.
Praise God.
Seriously, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. And I feel a lot better. Like, I actually feel like I have a life back. And it's weird, but I mean, it's just, there's another app that I use, but it's for talking with my friends and stuff like that. And it's, I was a big advocate for the social media because I used to think that people were more connected with it. Like, there's family members that I've never seen or haven't seen in 20, 30 years that I know we're having for dinner that night now. And we talk a little bit more, but we're still not visiting each other. And, you know, truth be told, if either one of us drop dead, we're not going to show up to the funeral. So I feel like, with, especially Instagram and Facebook, those two, I found that by getting rid of them, it kind of enriched my life in other areas and felt better. But I know everybody, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to like burn it all to the ground, but I'm just saying, you know, that might be something to consider for a lot of people, is that just, honestly, if I need to talk to somebody, I'll knock on your door.
So, and I'll just make a comment on the other end. I have no problem with social media, anybody that uses social media. I've never actually been on any of the platforms, and I don't feel any less connected. So, you know, yeah, you could go that
You're a
other
pretty
way.
chill guy, you're not stressed out. I'm like,
No.
right.
Because I'm not watching the number of likes, so I won't.
I was going to second what Ross was saying. I mean, in terms of, I think that there's so much of a desire to be connected at some level when you're on social media. But I've had times where I've actually signed off of Facebook, like for an extended period of time, and just not used it. Well, I mean, it was just literally, you know, Philip and I were just talking about that this morning with what's going on with some of these things between Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and some of these things, and it's really like you said, it gives you a false comparison, number one, of what's going on, but also there is what's going on right now is a lot of censorship on all these platforms, and they're not censoring things that are immoral or depraved. They're censoring things like Christians and things that have a conservative bent, you know, from a conservative principles, or something that might relate to the founding of this country or something like that. It's, you know, if you're pro-Constitution, then you're a nationalist. So, I mean, it's bizarre, but that's the reality, and I don't know that, I think, you know, how much value we're getting out of it versus what value are we to these other agencies. Right. In other words, we think, oh, it's great, this has a certain value to me. We may be worth more to them than they are to us because of all the information that they gather.
Yeah, and I guess just one thing, I don't want to turn into a discussion of social media.
Sure.
But no, this is good discussion, but really, you know, that point is thinking about contentment. Social media has changed things. So if that is something that's causing you discontentment, just the fact that you're on social media, you know, maybe that's something that you might want to consider, you know, how do I monitor that or throttle it down a little bit? And, you know, just one other thought that I had, you know, it's bad enough knowing that all of my thoughts and actions are known by God, but, you know, if that isn't convicting enough to want to glorify God, if you think about it, if you do tweet or comment or whatever you do on social media, you know, that's all known by God too. So if you're, you know, if you're living a sanctified life otherwise, but then you go online and you're just ranting, you know, that's all known to God too. So just a thought, something to consider.
I repented for a lot of that stuff, actually.
So, back to the question of why is contentment harder today than 25 years ago? I would say that, like, one thought that sort of a different direction than Mannion took it, but I think that there's less of a gospel saturation in our country, and not just 25 years ago, but I'd say since the 1840s, it's been progressively harder for people to be content, because since that time period, the shift has gone from going deep to going wide, in the sense of, rather than digging deep into the Word, the whole focus since the Second Great Awakening, since Finney and company, has been reach as many people as you can, as quickly as you can, to build bigger buildings, to have wider influence, to make more money, to build bigger buildings, to reach more people, to have more influence. And it's just this big circle of reductionism. And you have to, the church has been, and I don't sound like a broken record because this is a huge lamentation of my heart, but when I was in my undergrad, I was at a mega church, and I was watching a 450 member youth group who knew nothing about the Bible, but they've been entertained to death. That you turn the lights off, they jump up and down, they don't know the scriptures, and then you get to the college group and there's 10 people. And I asked the youth pastor, what's going on? He said, well, they all leave. When they go to college, they all leave. And I'm like, well, why don't we teach them something? Why don't we do something different than what we've been doing, which is teaching them nothing? And I'm talking to the kids, and they're like, nobody's ever talked to us about the Bible. Nobody's ever challenged us with how we're actually doing with the faith. I had one kid tell me they just learned to raise their hands in worship and jump up and down, and nobody would bother them. And so then I start reading in my undergrad these tactics of when you want the church to be successful, you can't go a 14-year-old level of understanding. You keep everything shallow. You don't deal with the offensive passages. And this is right here in the open in my curriculum. And I'm like, and I'm grieved of heart, but they rationalized it because they said we need to get as many people saved as possible. But what happens is they're not really saved. And number one, and number two, you end up with a church with people who are so shallow in their understanding of God and of life that they can't be content in God because they don't know God. And so then they play the game. And they play the game of looking like this Christian that is okay because that's how you're supposed to be. But then they get out in the real world and they're not really content. And they don't have the tools to be content because the church is not giving it to them. So I think that is a huge issue in our culture. We have a very shallow manifestation of Christianity, as opposed to looking in the past where Christians could stand up to lions and they're ready to die.
So I guess just trying to wrap it up, and I think I mentioned this previously. Just thinking about contentment in your own life, is there anything that you need to examine? I think about this picture of a timesheet. If you ever filled out a timesheet for work, it's okay, I worked on this project for this many hours. Think about the timesheet of your life. I mean, God has that. So He knows, you slept so many hours, you ate so many hours, but you also devoted so many hours to studying Scripture. You devoted so many hours to the pursuit of whatever it is. So if you could see the timesheet of your life and examine it, is there anything in there that you need to address? I think that's the point is there something that is preventing you from being content that you're spending too much time on or too much money on? That would be the other thing. So that would be the one kind of self-reflective thought to take out of this. Is there anything that in my life is causing me to be discontent, whatever that might be? And again, all that to say that desire is not necessarily a bad thing. God wants you to enjoy this life, but He wants you to do it in a way that glorifies Him. So certainly that doesn't mean to cancel desire. It's good to desire things, but to do it in a godly way. Do we know so I'll close in prayer, but do we know what we might be doing next week? Okay, we don't know that yet, so it'll be a surprise. It'll be a surprise subject and a surprise teacher. So,
Not the Book of Mormon.
okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, can eliminate that.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and close this in prayer, and we'll get out a few minutes early to make up for the time I kept you over last week. Again, Lord, we do just thank you for the rich teaching that started with Burroughs, and just pray that if there is anything that we can take from this to, if we are steering off course or steering away from you, that we might get back on a correct path. Just pray that you would reveal that to our hearts. And if we're not sure, then pray that you would allow us to contact close friends or talk with our spouse or our family. And if there's areas that maybe they see that we don't, just pray that you'd use this time. But ultimately, Lord, pray that you would give us a satisfied heart, that we would be content with you and you alone, and that we would enjoy the good gifts you give to us in all circumstances, whether in plenty or in want. Just thank you for this time over these past few months, as even going back as we started the Book of Contentment all the way through the video tonight. Just pray that you would continue to bless us, and again, just help us to learn anything it is that we need to learn. Pray in Jesus'